when a trapped scout became a one-man army. This 3-day nightmare changed everything. It is a story that defies belief, a testament to the extremes of human endurance and combat effectiveness, born of sheer desperation. We are in the frozen hellscape of the Eastern Front, January 1944. The Red Army's winter offensive is tearing through German lines. In this chaos, a single soldier, a Gefreiter, a corporal of the 14th Panzer Division's reconnaissance battalion, finds himself isolated, surrounded, and declared missing in action. His name is Josef Sepp Allerberger. And, for the next 72 hours, he will not retreat, he will not surrender, he will wage a private war. To understand the nightmare, we must first understand the man and the moment. By late 1943, the German war machine in the East is bleeding out. After the catastrophe at Kursk, the initiative has irrevocably passed to the Soviets. Operation Dnieper Carpathian, the Soviet winter-spring offensive, is a relentless, grinding push designed to shatter Army Group South. Our focus is on a critical, volatile sector near the town of Vinnytsia. Here, the 14th Panzer Division, a veteran formation but a shadow of its former strength, is attempting a fighting retreat to stabilize a new defensive line. Within its ranks is the 54th Panzer Reconnaissance Battalion, the eyes and ears of the division. Among its scouts is a young Austrian from Styria, Josef Allerberger. Originally trained as a machine gunner, a severe wound earlier in the war saw him retrained as a Scharfschütze, a sniper. This was not a choice, but a reassignment born of necessity. Allerberger was not a fanatical Nazi, but a soldier who had mastered a grim craft. His weapon was the standard German Karabiner 98K rifle, fitted with a 4x scope, not the more specialized sniper variants. His tactics were those of survival: shoot, displace, hide, survive. He had already accumulated a significant number of Abschüsse, or confirmed kills, a somber tally that spoke to his lethal efficiency. But nothing in his training could prepare him for what was about to happen. In early January, during a probing action to locate the advancing Soviet spearheads, Allerberger's reconnaissance team was caught in a violent artillery barrage and a subsequent infantry assault. In the blinding snow and confusion, he became separated. When the survivors fell back, Allerberger was nowhere to be found. He was listed as vermisst, missing, presumed captured or dead, but he was very much alive, and he was trapped. Allerberger found himself in a nightmarish no-man's land. His immediate position was a small wooded rise, overlooking a shallow valley that served as a natural approach route. A kilometer to his rear lay the last known German positions. Between him and them, however, was a landscape now crawling with Soviet advance elements from the 4th Guards Rifle Corps. He was behind enemy lines, his only assets his rifle, 80 rounds of ammunition, 4 grenades, his Zeltbahn shelter quarter for camouflage, and an iron will. Allerberger found himself in a nightmarish no-man's land. His immediate position was a small wooded rise, overlooking a shallow valley that served as a natural approach route. A kilometer to his rear lay the last known German positions. Between him and them, however, was a landscape now crawling with Soviet advance elements from the 4th Guards Rifle Corps. He was behind enemy lines. His only assets his rifle, 80 rounds of ammunition, 4 grenades, his Zeltbahn shelter quarter for camouflage, and an iron will. His first decision was one of sheer survival. To run across open ground was suicide. His only hope was to hold his position, remain undetected, and hope the German line solidified or counterattacked. But hope is not a tactic. As the column drew nearer, within 400 yards, the lead tank's main gun fired a ranging shot toward the German rear. The blast kicking up a geyser of snow and dirt. The infantry fanned out into skirmish lines. They were preparing to assault. Allerberger later recounted the cold calculus that followed. To engage was to reveal himself and invite annihilation, but to do nothing was to allow an unchecked force to roll up his division's flank. He chose to fight. Selecting a target, he focused on a senior-looking commandeer barking orders. He inhaled, exhaled halfway, and squeezed the trigger. The crack of the 7.92mm round was lost in the wind. The officer crumpled. Confusion rippled through the Soviet line. They dove for cover, scanning the tree line. A one-man war had begun. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse. Allerberger shifted position after every shot, crawling through the snow under his camouflaged Zeltbahn. He targeted squad leaders, machine gunners, and radio operators. By noon, he had halted the column's advance, pinning the infantry down. But the tanks were another matter. A sniper's rifle is useless against armor. One T-34, its commander frustrated, began to traverse its turret and hose the suspected sniper's positions with its coaxial machine gun. Rounds shredded the trees around Allerberger, splinters of wood mixing with falling snow. He burrowed deeper into a hollow, the deafening roar of the machine gun and the tank's engine filling his world. By 1400 hours, the Soviets adapted. They began deploying mortar teams. The first rounds, inaccurate, walked in from the east. Allerberger knew what this meant. Once they had his range, his tiny pocket of forest would become a hellscape of high explosives and shrapnel. He had to silence the observers. Spotting a two-man team with a map and field telephone near a shattered pine, he took a risky, longer shot. The observer fell. The mortar fire ceased temporarily, buying him time. As dusk fell on the first day, the temperature plunged. The Soviet force, stung and wary, dug in for the night, posting heavy guards. Allerberger was now a prisoner in his own sniper's nest, unable to move without triggering a flare or a burst of automatic fire. He spent the night in a shallow scrape in the frozen earth, shivering uncontrollably, chewing on a hardtack biscuit, his mind racing. He could hear the sounds of the enemy, voices, the clink of mess tins, the rumble of engines bringing up reinforcements. He was surrounded by an entire battalion. The nightmare was just beginning. Dawn on the second day revealed the true scale of Allerberger's predicament. The valley was no longer just a transit route. It was becoming a major axis of advance. Fresh columns of Soviet troops and supplies were moving up. His isolated hillock was now a stubborn thorn in the side of a regimental-sized movement, and they were determined to pluck it out. The morning opened, not with probing infantry, but with concentrated mortar and heavy machine gun fire. A Maxim gun team, set up at 800 yards, began systematically raking the tree line. The trees, already splintered, offered less and less cover. Shrapnel and wood chips filled the air. Allerberger was forced to crawl on his belly into a waterlogged shell crater, the icy water seeping into his uniform. A new agony added to the cold. He was wet, freezing and running low on ammunition. Then came the hunters. The Soviets, understanding they were dealing with a skilled sniper, deployed their own. The distinctive, slower crack of a Mosin Nagant 9130 sniper rifle snapped past his head. A duel began, a silent, invisible duel where a single mistake meant death. For hours, Allerberger lay motionless, his body numb, his eyes scanning for the slightest movement, the faintest glint of an enemy scope. He could not return fire without giving away his new position. The psychological strain was immense. Every shadow, every irregularity in the snow became a potential enemy. The crisis peaked in the early afternoon. A platoon of Soviet infantry, supported by a PTRS-41 anti-tank rifle team, began a deliberate, sweeping advance toward his position. They moved methodically, from tree to tree, firing short bursts into any potential hiding spot. The anti-tank rifle, designed to penetrate armor, was being used as a tool of demolition. Its massive 14.5mm rounds tore through tree trunks as if they were paper, exploding on impact with the frozen ground. Allerberger was being compressed, his viable space shrinking with every minute. At this moment, everything seemed lost. He was out of grenades. He had fewer than 30 rounds left. His fingers were so stiff he could barely operate the bolt of his rifle. The enemy was closing to within 50 yards. He could hear their commands. To his rear, the sound of heavy fighting indicated the German main line was still under assault, unable to mount any rescue. He was utterly alone. The weight of the impossible situation pressed down on him. Fear, cold, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm his senses. To fight was to die, but to be captured on the Eastern Front, especially for a sniper, often meant a fate worse than death. Posrundhunthi, Kunrant, in this nadir of despair, a single brutal thought crystallized. If he was to die, he would make them pay for every inch. He would become more than a sniper. He would become a specter, a force of chaos. Waiting until the lead enemy scout was almost upon his crater, he rose up, not to shoot, but to scream. A raw, guttural cry that startled the advancing soldiers. In that split second of confusion, he fired twice, dropping 2 men, and then vanished. crawling through a pre-scouted gully filled with debris and snow, leaving the enemy firing wildly at his ghost. Allerberger's feigned breakout had caused a crucial diversion. The Soviet platoon focused its search to the west of his original position, but he had slithered east, back toward the valley's edge, to a new hiding place he had noted days before. The shattered remains of a burned-out German SPW, an armored half-track. Its twisted hull offered both concealment and, critically, a new field of fire directly onto the enemy's main line of communication. Here, the trapped scout evolved his tactics. He was no longer just targeting infantry. He began a campaign of strategic disruption. His target selection became his weapon of command. He waited for a horse-drawn supply cart carrying mortar shells. A single, well-placed shot into the ammunition crates created a catastrophic explosion that lit up the early evening, destroying the cart and causing panic. He then shifted to the field telephone lines he could see snaking across the snow, severing communications with precise shots that cut the wires. But his most critical intervention was yet to come. As night fell on the second day, he observed the arrival of a Soviet command group setting up a forward observation post in a farmhouse ruin at the valley's edge. Through his scope, he saw maps being unfolded and an artillery officer speaking on a radio. They were almost 500 yards away. A long shot, but not impossible. Allerberger understood that this OP was the key to directing the wrath of the Soviet guns onto his own comrades. He had to neutralize it. Setting his scope for the distance, accounting for the bitter cold's effect on ballistics, he steadied his rifle against the half-track's fender. His breath fogged in the air. He focused on the officer with the radio. The shot had to be perfect. He squeezed. The officer fell. Chaos erupted in the ruin. A second shot took out a man grabbing for the radio. A third dissuaded others from approaching the equipment. The observation post fell silent. For the next several hours, the coordination of Soviet artillery in this sector was severely degraded. Allerberger, the lone, presumed dead scout, had just influenced the battle at an operational level. On the morning of the third day, the sound of the battle changed. The distinct report of German MG-42s and the deeper thump of PaK-40 anti-tank guns grew louder, closer. A local German counterattack by elements of the 14th Panzer's Panzer Grenadiers had finally been launched. The Soviet forces in the valley, their flanks now threatened and their command disrupted, began a disorganized pullback. Allerberger, watching from his metal cocoon, waited until he saw the distinctive silhouettes of Stahlhelm approaching cautiously through the smoke. Only then did he emerge, a frost-covered spectral figure, nearly unrecognizable as a German soldier. He had survived his 3-day nightmare. The aftermath was one of stunned disbelief. Josef Allerberger returned to his unit, not as a missing soldier, but as a living legend. His actions during those 72 hours were verified by after-action reports and the testimony of the counter-attacking troops who saw the disproportionate number of Soviet dead concentrated around his position. An estimated 64 confirmed kills during the 3-day ordeal, though the true number, including disruptions and delays caused, is incalculable. He had single-handedly disrupted a major avenue of advance, delayed the reinforcement of Soviet frontline units, and neutralized a key command post. His will to survive had become a significant tactical obstacle for the enemy. For his actions, which undoubtedly saved countless comrades and stabilized a precarious section of the line, Gefreiter Josef Allerberger was awarded the German Army's highest honor, the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. He was one of only a handful of snipers to receive this decoration. His story, while extraordinary, is emblematic of the brutal, isolated nature of the Eastern Front, where individual soldiers were sometimes forced to become strategic assets through sheer grit and skill. Pause. The legacy of this 3-day nightmare is multifaceted. Tactically, it became a case study in the disruptive power of a single, determined marksman operating behind enemy lines. For Allerberger personally, it was a transformative trauma that propelled him to become one of the most effective snipers of the war, with a final confirmed tally surpassing 250. Historically, it stands as a stark reminder of the war's desperate personal dimensions, where the tide of a battle could momentarily hinge on the courage and resourcefulness of one man, alone in the snow, armed with little more than a rifle and an indomitable will to see another dawn. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. A story of isolation, unimaginable pressure, and the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit in the face of annihilation. Subscribe to Untold War Stories as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history